Hey guys, Maniac here once again for GameAccess.net, here to help you guys out with another how-to. After my Xbox 360 HDTV video, a lot of people have been asking me, especially HDMI owners, how do I use HDMI? And I really only kind of just sort of breezed by and kind of glossed over HDMI hookups. I didn't really do a complete how-to on if you wanted to use an HDMI connection, if your HDTV and if your Xbox 360 were equipped with HDMI ports. So, got some HDMI 1.3 cable here. This is what we're going to need. You're going to want to make sure that when you buy HDMI cable that it meets certain requirements. You're going to want a bandwidth of probably around, I don't know, I would say usually standard nowadays is about 10.6 gigabits a second. That should be more than enough. There probably is less, but nowadays that's pretty much the standard and it works just fine. You're also going to want HDCP compliance. That'll be written on the package. You want that. That you absolutely must have. You could also be seeing these recommendations and also in these things for HDMI 1.4 cable. You're not going to need to buy HDMI 1.4 cable. It's more expensive than HDMI 1.3 cable. That's because that's for 3D video. And if you don't even have a 3D TV, it's not going to do you any good at all. If you have a PlayStation 3 and if you have a 3D TV, then yeah, you'll want HDMI 1.4 cable. But for our purposes, HDMI 1.3 is all we're going to need. This is the Xbox video output. We're not going to need this anymore. This is a legacy optical connection for surround sound. We're not going to need this anymore unless you have a unless you have a non-HD receiver or a receiver that does not have a an HDMI connection. And we have an HDMI connection right here. This is what we're going to be using for everything. If you have an Xbox or a Model 1 Xbox particularly that does not have an HDMI cable back here, it will be below the Xbox video port. If there's no HDMI port on the back of your Xbox, I'm sorry, you can't do this. My advice would be to sell your Xbox and get a different one, because you will need an HDMI port to do this, and some of those, especially the launch consoles, did not come with HDMI ports. So what we're going to do is put the HDMI cable into the back of the Xbox. This is HDMI 1.3 cable. And that is step one. If you use a high definition receiver box, then what you want to do is you want to take the 360's HDMI cable and plug it into one of the back inputs on the receiver box. From there, find the output, which is usually labeled on the back of the receiver box. You'll probably already have it hooked up to the back of the TV anyway. And we'll go with it from there. If you do not have a receiver box, skip this step. Look for the HDMI connection on the back of your television. It looks like right there, and they'll usually just be marked in the newer TVs. Take the HDMI cable that's either coming directly from the back of your 360 or the back of your receiver if you're using a receiver, and plug it into the television as so. Once all the cables are connected, turn your television on. Then if you have one, turn your HD receiver on. Make sure that the television is set to the input that you have the Xbox on, or if you have a receiver, the receiver's on. If you have a receiver, make sure it's set to the input that you connected the Xbox to. And then turn on your Xbox. Now the reason why I make sure that you do not have any of this equipment turned off before turning on the Xbox is because the Xbox will not properly have surround settings enabled unless the receiver box is already on before. Otherwise, it will default to stereo sound. So make sure that the receiver and the television are on before turning on the Xbox, and make sure it's all set to the proper inputs before turning on the Xbox. If what I'm showing you guys doesn't work, then likely there's a problem with the cable. Like if you test this out and you get a black picture or something like that, then you probably do have a problem with the cable. If not, you could have a bad HDMI port, in which case you might have to send your your Xbox 360 out for service repairs. However, I would strongly advise, if it gets to that point, to double check the cable and the television the Xbox on different televisions, and try different cables, just to make sure that it's not in fact just a TV problem or a Xbox problem before calling up the service station. But I have certainly seen that if all has failed, then usually the likelihood of a reason why you have a black screen, even if you have audio, is because the Xbox 360 is bad.